So, it's Women's History Month, March, and it's time to talk about dads. Wait, what? Hi, welcome back to the Colorblind Architect Podcast. I'm your host, David, and as I mentioned in the intro, today is March 1st. It is the beginning of Women's History Month, and I can talk about that on another day, but let me also introduce you to Apollo. Apollo is my puppy, and he is very energetic and really wants me to play with him. So hopefully I can keep him calm enough while I present my review of the movie Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood with Tom Hanks playing the part of Fred Rogers, more commonly known as Mr. Rogers. Now, here's what I would like to start off in talking about is the movie itself was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. Now, why am I reviewing it now when it came out a couple years ago? Well, frankly, it's because my wife borrowed it from the library. We finally got around to watching it. And yeah, so it's timely for me, okay, man? You don't have to work around your schedule. It's my vlog. So anyways, so like I said, my puppy, Apollo, he really wants to play right now. And so, about the movie, Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, it's actually less about Mr. Rogers and more about Lloyd Vogel. Now, you might be thinking, who the heck is Lloyd Vogel? Lloyd Vogel is the character in the movie who is a magazine author who is supposed to be writing a puff piece about Mr. Rogers on a Heroes Week edition of their magazine. Now, he gets really into it because, honestly, he's an investigative journalist and he likes tearing people down. He likes, ripping them apart. Now, why? I don't know. Part of it, his backstory seems to indicate that he's very cynical, very mistrusting of people, and largely due to the fact that he really was he was kind of screwed over by his dad when he was a kid, because when his mom was sick and dying, his dad split town. And much of the story revolves around the fact that Lloyd is very concerned, very unwilling to forgive his father. Now, his father shows back up at his sister's third wedding, and, Lloyd just does not want to have anything to do with him. They come to blows. They end up in a fist fight. Now, it's shortly after this fist fight that he meets Mr. Rogers at his studio in Pittsburgh, and he's just kind of blown away at who this guy is, who Mr. Rogers is, and how he behaves, and it's just very different than every other person he's ever interviewed. Through the course of the movie, he interviews Mr. Rogers several other times, and a lot of times it ended up being Mr. Rogers interviewing Lloyd and actually exploring into the nature of Lloyd's relationship with his father, and kind of ended up helping Lloyd overcome all these issues that he was having with his wife and with his father. And actually, by the end of the movie, they actually have a beautiful reconciliation, a tender, loving moment at the end of the father's life. And it was emblematic of who Fred Rogers was as a person. He was a devout Christian, and his whole purpose in creating the show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, was to try to help children deal with pain loss, suffering, to help them learn how to be good people, to love one another. And in this particular story, especially to forgive. Now, for me, as you know, I recently did a video about Rush Limbaugh, right after his passing, and I did it because he had been a very important part of my life. And I feel the same way about Fred Rogers, in the fact that I grew up watching Mr. Rogers as a child, and I think a lot of kids in my generation did. And I never really thought much of it. I never really thought too much about the impact that Fred Rogers had on my life and my way of thinking. Not until this movie, and also as I reflect back on it and I think about, oh wow, that probably did have a major impact on my life. And part of this has to do with my own father and the experience that I had this past week. So this past week, my father, he visited me from out of town. He lives 2,000 miles away. Well, he flies out here to Utah, and we go skiing together. Now, normally this wouldn't be that big of a deal, but the factor that was really interesting here was 2 years ago, my father had triple bypass heart surgery. It was a devastating blow to my emotions, so to speak, because for the first time, I had to really actually confront the idea that, wow, one day my dad, he's gonna die. And I think mentally we all kind of understand that. Mentally we all kind of get it, that there is this thing called death. It comes upon us all, every single one of us. But it's not something that you really think. It's more something that you think about in terms of it happens to other people, not to me, not to my family. Even though, all of my grandparents are already passed away, and so it's not like I don't know about death. It's just I've been very fortunate. My parents have enjoyed reasonably good health throughout most of their life, and even though it did come down to my dad having triple bypass heart surgery, it was something that it was tough to go through, even for me as the son, looking at my dad and considering the fact that, yeah, there was a chance that he could actually pass away. Add to that, so, let's just go back to the fact that this past week he was skiing with me. So he obviously recovered. In fact, marvelously, he's recovered very well. And as a result, he was actually skiing better than I had seen him ski in probably at least 15 years. And it was a wonderful week to be able to spend that time together, father and son, because for me, that was a relationship that's always meant so much to me. He taught me so much. So a good friend of mine, we actually went to preschool together. We actually were babies, like her mom babysat me as a toddler, so we kind of grew up together, and then we were friends throughout, even up through the end of high school, and we still retain our friendship, just mostly via Facebook, because she lives 2,000 miles away. But she's one of these individuals in my life who I was never super close emotionally, but there was always that familial relationship. She was almost like a sister to me, and she posted on Facebook just the other day that she had to perform CPR on her father, and her father still ended up passing away despite the best efforts of the paramedics. and how heartbroken she was. Go back to the movie, Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Towards the end of the movie, Lloyd Vogel's father passes away, right? Now just imagine how much more difficult, how much more horrendous, and how much sadder it would have been had his father passed away without the reconciliation that happened right before. Now, granted, it's a movie, so I don't think the actual narrative of Lloyd Vogel is a real story. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But it's a very real story in the fact that this happens every day. Every day there are wounds. There are relationships that just continue to go unmended. You know, as a society, we've really turned our backs on God. We've turned our backs on the messages of Jesus Christ. And I don't say that to try to preach necessarily. I say it more in the standpoint of the teachings of Jesus Christ were about forgiveness and about love. You know, when Jesus Christ was on this earth, you know, that was, you know, during the reign of Augustus Caesar. It was a tumultuous time for the Jewish people. They were continually fighting for their independence, subjugated by the Romans, and some would say that the Romans were rightfully ruling them in the fact that the Jews were not rightfully ruling themselves at the time. You could say that. It's always a possibility. But regardless of the politics and all the different factors that go into the historical context of when Jesus was there, the fact of the matter remains that when Jesus came, it was at a time when the Jews were desperately praying to God for a Messiah, a deliverer, right? A Moses-type character to free them, to liberate them from the subjugation to the Romans. And what did God send them? God sent them a long-haired hippie, so to speak. He sent them a long-haired hippie wearing sandals, telling them about peace and love, right? Well, I say that tongue-in-cheek, but the point being is, you know, Jesus came in talking about forgiveness and love. He didn't come in with a battalion of soldiers and trying to overtake the land of Palestine from the Romans. No, he taught the Jews, you know, you need to love thy neighbor. And you need to be good to one another. Well, that's not the message that the Jews wanted at the time. And even to the point where, you know, he ends up being crucified by the very people that he came to teach about love. But that message of forgiveness is one that I think we all really, really need to hear. We went through a really rough election season in 2020. Worse yet, we had race riots this past summer that were very damaging to our culture, very damaging to our society. Statues were toppled. Things were said. And there's a lot of people hurting on both sides. To the people who align with Black Lives Matter, they feel like society's out to get them. And to the people who hold dear the founding fathers and the principles of the Constitution, They feel like they feel like they were attacked when statues of people like Frederick Douglass were defaced and demolished by these rioters. Come down to the election, and it was even more confrontational. There was a lot of hateful things said on both sides, and it's really sad. But the irony is that what we need right now is not any kind of revolution or political solution right now. Right now, what we need is for people to calm down and to forgive one another. You know? It's not the message that most people want to hear, but it's not the message that I even want to hear. I mean, like, I'll tell you right now, I'm not too happy about the way things went. I was very disappointed in the Trump supporters who stormed the Capitol, but I was also thoroughly unhappy about the way a lot of people on the left and a lot of Democrats treated Republicans and treated Trump supporters in general. It was like there was just nothing but hate. And so when I say it's a timely review, like a lot of times when I'll do these timely reviews, like they're old movies or old books, and I jokingly call it a timely review because, I just finally got around to it. It's something that I'm finally, consuming that media. In this case, the movie, Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. And yeah, I mean, it's ironic that it's actually very timely. We do need that healing. We do need that spirit of forgiveness. As to Fred Rogers, he imbued that in his life. He lived it every day. He tried to be as Christ-like as he could, even though he never pushed the message of Christ necessarily. He lived the message of Christ, and by his example, he taught the nation's children in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. He taught the nation's children to have those principles. And now I have to admit, I'm wondering, where are we as a society? Why are we not living those principles today? And it's probably just because we've forgotten. Forgetting is something that's really easy to do. And what I would say is remembrance is a very important action. It's not something that happens passively to you. So in the Christian faith, we have something called communion or sacrament. And you're probably familiar with it if you're watching this video. It's the bread and the wine, right? In the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is the Christian faith that I'm a part of. We call it sacrament, and it's actually bread and water, but the point is the same. They are tokens to remember the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. And why is that important? Well, it's that act of remembrance, that weekly going through a ritual of trying to remind yourself of the teachings of Jesus Christ and his central message, because his central message was redemption. Well, you can't have redemption without forgiveness, because forgiveness is the only way that redemption actually happens, right? Jesus taught us that we need to forgive 7 times 70. Now, I don't think he was literally saying 490 times, okay? But what he was saying is that we need to always forgive our neighbor. We need to always forgive our loved ones. We need to always forgive even our enemies. that's the duty that we have. So as I close this vlog, which has actually been one of the toughest vlogs for me to put together so far, largely because it's a very emotional one, it's a difficult topic, but it's also, Apollo's hopped up on me way more times throughout many cuts of this video, and so that also made it really difficult. He finally let me actually finish a take. So, and if you've watched my videos, you probably know I always do these in one take. I don't like cutting it up. I lose my train of thought. This is all stream of consciousness as I do these. And so, anyways, central message, like I said, love thy neighbor, forgive. I'm not perfect at it at all. I have a lot of resentment and a lot of hate and anger in my heart that still needs to go away. And, you know, as to the movie, I loved the fact that they did make it clear that Mr. Rogers wasn't perfect either. And I think that's the thing we need to remember is everybody in this world is imperfect. Not a single one of us is perfect. So why are we holding people to an impossibly high standard of perfection? No, we need to start forgiving people. And with that, I'm going to close this vlog. Again, I'm the Colorblind Architect. Peace out.